Part B continues. Continues.
13-year-olds, and to be able to see it, I did not want an R rating, and this scene was so intense, and still is intense, but it was even more intense before, and they asked us, rightfully so, to kind of make it less intense. They never tell you what to do. They tell you the problem areas, and we cut it back a bit to get the idea across without having it become... Overall was a difficulty of this film that it was so, I shot it like an R-rated film. It has an R-rated attitude. It's intense, and I hope unrelentingly intense, but we couldn't get the R rating. It had to have a PG-13 because, young people, who loves cars more than people who yet can't drive or don't own a car yet? And I think that there was no way I was going to let the film be limited by the ratings of it, like an R rating. On the other hand, it had to have the toughness of an R-rated film. And it was a lot of straddling issues and a lot of threading needles to, use those phrases. There is no bad language, and yet the language is very rough. There is violence, but the violence is not excessive by the code. It is a film whose attitude is very adult, but does not have the excessiveness of blood packs blowing up and heads exploding and people being run over and the kind of harsh things that R-rated movies can portray. This picture of the guy Vin Diesel beat up is about as gruesome as we get in the movie. Of course, you've seen him before as Buffalo Bill in Jonathan Demme's Silence of the Lambs, a very scary character, a man skinning women to make himself a woman's suit. Remember My Precious and all that. That's Ted Levine, who you're watching right here. An amazing actor, very, very supple, method, very truthful, and versatile. Coming up is probably the pivotal scene in the film in terms of the empathy that I was talking about earlier. Introducing a new character, because cars are characters themselves. This is the 900 horsepower Charger, and it is in fact another of the dream fantasy cars in the film. But more importantly, it is the scene in which we come to understand Dominic Toretto, why a man of his age, his abilities, is seemingly trapped in a dead-end life. Remember I talked about the Western earlier on, about the hijackings, but there's also a Western plot in here. And for me, it was the old gunslinger who is trapped in the life of being the fastest gun in the West, and every young gun that wants to make a rep has to take a shot at him. And here, Dominic explains the supposed violence of his past had what we call extenuating circumstances. The death of his father, a man he adored, worshipped even, pushed him to the edge of violence. And that act of violence, that few minutes of loss of control, pretty much determined the course of the rest of his life. And it also reverses another perception. Paul Walker's a cop. He's been told this is a very, very dangerous man. Look what this dangerous man did with a socket wrench. Look how violent he is. And now the cop, listening to his new friend explain not only why he did it, but his enormous remorse at what he did. Not excusing it, but taking it like a man, something he greatly regrets, implying that he's kept tabs on the man, the race driver he beat up, who pushed his father into the wall. And we get to a rather florid but classic line, I live my life a quarter of a mile at a time. Nothing else matters. For those 10 seconds, I'm free. This scene, pure David Ayer, and just one of my favorite in the film. And here's the beast laying in wait for its third act re-entry into the film. Another of our beautiful time transitions in a junkyard, the end place of so many cars. We're in Cha Cha Cha, real restaurant in Hollywood. Wonderful, breezy place, very colorful. And this is one of the only sets, probably the only set, which I allowed to be highly colored, because suddenly there's more than the cars that are interesting in life for these young people. These two people are falling in love. And while going on, Jordana Brewster is filling us in on a little more of the history of the team, how they came together, and implying, again, why Vin Diesel carries this sort of supreme position in their lives, and him, Paul Walker, confessing that his real interest is not just Vin Diesel. Could have dinner with Jordana Brewster, I wouldn't be thinking about Vin Diesel either. This scene is, I wrote it on the day we shot it, because when we tried out the scene that had been written for this scene, it just didn't work with the way the film grew. So I had to sit down in my trailer and rewrite a new scene entirely, very quickly. This is the only bit of writing I did in the film, but it was sort of fill the gap and keep the picture going, keep the production moving. And sometimes that happens in movies, and sometimes scenes evolve from improvisation, and sometimes they evolve from other inspiration. As long as the picture lives and you listen to it and you allow it to grow, it very often will tell you what it wants, as opposed to you forcing your vision on it. By the way, to do a lot of these stunts, because Mick Rogers, our stunt coordinator, second unit director, designed a very useful piece of equipment we called the Mick rig, which towed car bodies behind a high-powered truck front that allowed a stunt driver to drive up front while it looked like our actors were driving the car. And it could go up to 80 miles an hour, which is considerably faster than an insert car, much more flexible, and we were able to throw donuts and Brodies and all sorts of stunts that are not capable on classic insert car equipment. So we'll talk more about that in the hijacking gone wrong in the beginning of the third act. A little sucky face, which every movie needs, but again, being PG-13, we couldn't get as far into it as Paul and Jordana wanted. I mean, as I wanted them to. Nice 14 millimeter shot of downtown Los Angeles. These are the real SWAT guys. These are not actors. These are true SWAT men. This is one reason I don't have many enemies, because I have some powerful friends. Originally planned on a big montage of building the Supra as one scene. Editing, and this is a good example of where many different scenes which were conceived of as scenes unto themselves are edited to a very strong piece of music to collapse time, save time, add energy. Ooh, I like this shot. Absolutely. And all scenes, again, were conceived as individual scenes and then reconceived as a montage. Cut and say, okay, this is what's all going on. But the different energies that are brought together here as the raids on Johnny Tran's people go down, as Vin Diesel and Michelle have a love scene, their own type of love scene in the garage, and the violence of a police takedown, the efficiency, the surgical precision of it. A little insight into the wealth of Rick Yoon's family, that these are not what you call the old idea of immigrants as in The Godfather, that these people have come to America and made a great deal of money. There's import-export or real estate, some ways that the Asian American community in LA have become wealthy, that Rick Yoon is not of the same socioeconomic group as the Vin Diesel clan. This actor is an extra, really. He wasn't an actor, Glenn, his name was, and he was asked to pull off that very big emotional moment and did it very well. Not fair for me to make that up and ask him to do it, but he did it. Another nice day-to-night transition around the pool, a little Hockney-esque imagery in this house, which is actually a 360-degree structure built like a donut around the pool. Everything curved, all the glass curved, all the walls curved, as you can see. It's a very interesting kind of architectural masterpiece. It was the home that Eddie Fisher built for Elizabeth Taylor during their much covered, press-covered affair back in, I guess it was the 50s. We're back in the police procedural world. I can put it on whoever I got past this sort of Dirty Harry, I'm gonna bust you scene. We got a very good moment between Ted and Paul where the choice of families, the police family, which of course is a clan, is truly a family, or the street racing family of Vin Diesel, is now the choice that this young cop is facing. Always touched by the paternal care and restraint that Ted is able to show here as an actor. The confusion that Paul plays but doesn't overplay. And just his concern for Dominic, for that he won't go back to prison, that they might have to take him down with violence, perhaps fatal violence, is deeply eating him. And here Ted Levine, looking at his young protege and saying, look, there's a choice, and doing it without sentimentality and yet with a great deal of feeling. It's the finest of the police scenes. And here we have the finished Supra, another orgasmic dream car, one that I never got tired of shooting, driving, or looking at. Just had that magic. Valdemar showing me this orange, that it could be painted, and one of the things that I noticed that first night out in the valley when I saw my first race was how beautiful the colors of the cars were. They were not traditional black and red and silver, not like this Ferrari here, driven by this, well, actually, he looks a lot like our producer Neil Moritz. In fact, it is our producer Neil Moritz playing a real jerk, which is not Neil's real character, but it goes to show you that even in cameos, everybody is an actor. Neil decided this day that he really didn't need a Ferrari. On the Pacific Coast Highway, very complicated place to shoot because a lot of movie people live on the Pacific Coast Highway, and if you want trouble shooting a film, just try to shoot near movie people's houses because they really hate it. And we had to shoot this scene under great difficulty. Anyway, the fact is, here you have a nice merger of first and second unit, me shooting most of the stuff with the actors, Mick Rogers shooting most of the stuff just with the cars and stunt drivers. And here's one of my favorite hangouts, Neptune's Net. Don't move to LA thinking that this number of really beautiful girls hang out at Neptune's Net. They don't. It is a fun seafood place right out in Trancas. One of the interesting things here is, if you've seen the movie before, you've seen the scene, and you look at this beautiful sort of situation, real SoCal, classic surfing situation, the ocean, the seafood hut right on the highway, and so on. Now, as you watch the scene, watch the background. Because again, this picture cost $38 million. Its schedule was so tight that nothing got the amount of time that it should have had. We were always fighting the clock, fighting the sun. So as I shot this scene and tried to get the emotional pitch right, get the scene right, the sun was setting right there over that Pacific Ocean. And as you watch the time and the scene progress, you'll watch the background get darker and darker as the night set in. And Erickson and the camera team, the lighting team, all, Carl Bowles, our great gaffer, trying mightily to keep the scene alive, even though the background was shifting to night around in the day. So just another struggle. So you see that background there. That hill had bright sunlight on it at the beginning of the scene a minute ago, and now it's quite dark. And that's just filmmaking reality at $100,000 a day for shooting. San Bernardino. This is an airport used mostly for firefighting. Used image multiplication to create more cars. These are a day we had up to 1,500 of these cars, and we threw a big party, and most of the street racing world, or a lot of the street racing world in LA came. We had a really good time, especially during that scene. And anyway, it was 120 degrees here the day we shot all this, and it was burning up on that pavement, but it gave everybody a kind of interesting feeling of this kind of illicit event. We had a lot of fun shooting the races and creating the big party atmosphere. Again, no fender benders, no alcohol, no drugs. This was part of the perfect record of making this film. This is favorite scenes with Michelle Rodriguez for this guy, and David Douglas, his name, is a fine actor, playing the Rasta man, a real jerk. And if you watch the way Michelle picks up the money, you can see that she's giving him the finger. A little thing she threw in, that is why you love inventive actors. They can think of giving someone the finger, but to do it so subtly that you hardly realize it unless you got the DVD and some director's pointing it out. Any guy flagging the race is Craig Lieberman, our other wonderful tech advisor, who was very into the entire world. He and R.J. DeVera keeping us honest and straight, clear and truthful from beginning to end, and getting us wonderful coverage in the magazines at the end, Street Legal and Turbo and so on, to give us the legitimacy that a movie like this really needs. And you can't get the legitimacy for money. You can only get the legitimacy by being factual and getting it right. And that was really important to me because this is a world I clearly adore. And there's a nice techno crane shot, very versatile piece of equipment with a contracting arm. We turned switch. There were actually two Supras. One drove in, and we could follow that. And then Paul Walker waited right outside of the camera to pull in so that the shot looks like it's perfectly timed. It would have been very difficult to do any other way. Here I'm using two cameras on tracks that are perpendicular to each other, right angles to each other, shooting the scene. Again, racing the sun in this very, very long extended day in the 120-degree heat, trying to capture all of the activity when we had the 1,500 cars into pieces like this on subsequent days with less extras and less heat. The turning point for the third act, Jesse racing the villain for pink slips, for ownership of his father's Jetta. This Jetta, a very famous car in the street racing world. This is one of the first times a German car had been given this treatment, this rice rocket treatment, so successfully. Anyway, Chad Lindbergh, a very talented actor playing Jesse, an ADD kid that almost every kid in America can relate to, with idiosyncrasy and a kind of unique flavor and yet tremendous relatability. Wonderful character and a wonderful young actor. Very difficult scene for Vin and Rick. Two very strong men. Really called for Rick's character to take a beating. It was sometimes very difficult for actors to fall in with the needs of the plot. The humiliation of Johnny Tran's character here complete. His house was raided by SWAT. He is innocent of what the police thought he had done, yet his parents were humiliated. Losing face in the Asian culture is a tremendous disgrace, tremendous problem. Sensitivity to it is high, and he is very angry, believes that Dominic set him up from their old rivalry, and my feeling was that once you get hit by Vin Diesel with that kind of force, you would not be getting up. Rick wanted to make it a stronger fight. To doing a little echo of Girl Fight, something we threw in at the last minute. Another good moment for her. Here we had one of the only accidents in the film. If you watch the Samoan guard grabbing Vin was so into the moment, he back elbowed the guy and broke his nose. He was a stuntman. That was part of what he had to do. Vin is a very, very strong person, both as a man and character and as a physical entity. He had a rave sequence written in the script. The studio, Universal, when trimming the budget, we had to cut it. But we thought, why not throw the rave instead of in those hangars where it was originally written for? Why don't we throw it right out here in the parking lot? So I got the rave in, and BT got to write a good rave song for it. It's the first of the confessional moments, and this is pretty much leads to the climax of the second act, which is Brian confesses to his lover, to Mia, that he is in fact a cop, and that his entire undercover life, including under her covers, has been a lie in terms of its facade, but not in terms of his heart, and that he needs her help. It's a good moment because of the dramatic tension that is implied, because to tell someone, I lied to you, but I love you, and even though that's a big problem for you and me, we got to go do something larger than the two of us right now, and we got to go do it together, because you're the only one who knows where the hell your brother's headed, was a good compression on actors. And this night I had the flu and I had 102 fever, but we hung in there with Paul and Jordana and kept pushing and exploring the limits of the scene and trying to get a genuine sense of shock, surprise, and hurt, guilt, and sorrow, and urgency, all of which are delicate and complicated, and good moments, very well executed by these two fine young actors.
Mia, listen to me!
The whole structure of this leads us to this next scene. I'm going to start talking about it before they go because it's so complicated. The Hemet hijacking, shot in the Hemet Valley on a 3-mile strip of highway that they rerouted traffic around to give us use of, took 2 to 3 weeks with first and second unit shooting. The complexity of it was that I wanted to utilize the real cast in a complicated, dangerous stunt sequence to a degree not normally done. And Mick Rogers and I, worked it through, which was the development of the Mick rig. We're doing visual effects. We actually are doing green screen. They're not speeding through the desert. They're actually in Hollywood on a stage, but has been done since the beginning of time in movies. We are matting in the whizzing backgrounds, but thanks to the new Kodak matte stock and through the diligent work of Illusion Arts, we are now able to do it at a more believable level than the old days. If you look at the James Bond movies and Sean Connery driving the Aston Martin, in any dialogue scene, you'll see how far we've come in making you believe that green screen can work. Mick rig, which is a long chassis car or truck in which we can put the entire car body of any car, of the Supra, of the Civics, of the RX-7, whatever we needed to tow with the actors. And I'm going to sort of point some of these things out in the coming scene because it's one that I'm most proud of. It's 7 minutes of nonstop movement, like an homage to Road Warrior, but utilizing not stunt people, our cast. And part of the success of that is that the equipment we designed kept the actors completely safe. No matter how dangerous what they did looks, they were never in any danger. And that is the art of making action films in a responsible way, to give the audience all the reality and all the intensity that you want them to experience, but not to risk lives to bring that result about. Here we're still on a stage with green screen, but soon we will be in Hemet in the valley, moving at between 50 and 70 miles an hour. and jumping from trucks and cars and doing everything to make this what I think is a very effective sequence. In a funny way, karma. This is the debt that Dominic must pay for his preying on these trucks, for the heartache and terror that he's brought to other drivers, to the illegal activity that he's been involved in and involved his team in. This is when it comes back. And I am a student of Buddhism, believe that this is the truth of life, that there are karmic debts to be paid, possibly not as one-to-one as this is. You know, you prey on trucks, you get punished by trucks. But there is a debt to be paid for one's actions. The debt for these anti-heroes in the picture. It's one of the reasons I never made the truck driver, played by Kevin Smith, a stuntman, never made him a character, because he is not a character, he is an idea. This truck is a monster menace here to even the karmic scales of justice, because for Dominic, of justice between him and Paul Walker ultimately don't have to apply in the traditional way. The karma is paid for here. Now, if you'll look, you'll see that Vin Diesel is driving the car and Vince is on the front of the truck. The camera is moving back and forth between these actors, really moving at these speeds, and there's the truck in the background. Here's Michelle coming around. It's a great combination of first and second unit work, but whenever you see these actors, they are being driven, they are not driving. The choreography here that I'm proud of is that it's seamless. If the truck is behind Michelle Rodriguez in one place, it's in the right place when we cut to the second unit team. Wonderful coordination between Mick Rogers and myself. But here, Matt Schultz is really on the front of that truck, and it really is going 60 miles an hour. Now, he's wired, bang. It was a very dangerous stunt pulled off. Mike Justice, I think his name was, wonderful stuntman, and intercut with pieces of Matt Schultz. But he is 18 inches off that highway, going 60 miles an hour, and there's Vin being towed by Mick Rogers in the Mick rig. So there we get stuff like this, which would have been almost impossible to do any other way. Karma taking the revenge, ratcheting up the tension as Dominic's situation goes from bad to worse. I don't know how many hundreds of cuts are in this sequence. I've never counted them. Maybe some of you cinema buffs will someday go on your DVD and count them. I know how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of setups and how many hundreds of times we had to drive up and down that highway to create this scene. And I'm, again, very happy with the result and where all the characters are and how each actor is staying completely committed to the scene, whether they are acting like here, like Johnny Strong, or whether they are asked to do something as dangerous as Matt Schultz, who, after the scene was done, was given an honorary membership in Stunts Unlimited by the stuntmen for his courage to hang on that truck day after day after day after day. Why? Completely safetied, but nonetheless, it's not something everyone would do. That super just blasting by, that was CG. We needed to add that later to tie Letty and Leon into the scene. There's Matt Schultz truly on the truck, Vin Diesel truly looking like he's driving, and here comes Paul Walker to the rescue with Jordana Brewster, and again wanting to keep the women involved in the action scenes. Letty turns out to be the one who goes under the truck, and Jordana has to drive the Supra. We prove that she can drive in the cha-cha-cha scene, so it doesn't come out of nowhere. And now Paul Walker, again looking like he's driving, but being towed at 70 miles, 80 miles an hour, and actually climbing out of the truck, again, wired through his pants to the car, a stuntman in a box below the car, which has been removed digitally in case, God forbid, the wire should break or anything unforeseen should happen. There was someone there and a place for him to land. Stunt, Chris Tuck doing Paul Walker's doubling, and now Paul on the front of the speeding truck, Giordano driving, Vince Matschultz on the step, and you see all three actors in high-speed movement, hanging on for dear life, and yet everybody was completely safe. It's illusion. Core operating as well as DPing, panning from one bit of action to the next. Just say, look, they're all here in the one shot. And finally, we're out of that into the next dramatic moment. The confession. And like I said before, in a story content way, Vince, who has distrusted Paul Walker's character from the beginning, has known he's a cop from the beginning, has hated him from the beginning, has been willing to kill him at one point in the movie. Now his life is in the hands of this cop. And it's because of Vince that Brian has to confess who he is, because he has to call in the medevac to save the man that hates him, to do his duty. He has to take a chance and show Vin Diesel who he is.
Yeah.
Score here, completely effective. Huge thunderous crashes in the bass line, subwoofers shaking, showing the power, or reflecting and enhancing the power of the shock and the anger in Vin Diesel, in his character, as he looks to his sister. Did she know? She didn't know. And Paul trying to do his duty, expecting any minute to have the life choked out of him by his irate and very strong friend. Line rollout coming in, the medevac coming in. All the personal problems held in abeyance while the life and death situation is dealt with. The medevac team doing what they do every day for a living. And here's the dramatic crisis. Brother or lover, where does she go? And of course, blood is thicker than erotica. What we did in dubbing here was, of course, all this had sound and had dialogue and so on. And I just felt that somehow it wasn't working. It was too much screaming, and the music was fighting, the helicopter sound, nothing had the resonance that I thought it should have. And one day when I came in, I went, look, let's just dial all that sound out and just let BT's music play, and let's let the images carry. Because I think the images were clear and powerful, simple, but very primal and direct, and bring the sound back in on this shot. So that is what we did, and it turned out to really enhance that moment, and I think make it more effective and give BT's fine score a chance to play on its own without the sound effects. I might say that this film has over 10,000 different sound effects in just the racing and hijacking sequences alone. Bruce Stambler and his team, Jay Nuremberg, the sound designer of the realistic part of the film, and Bruce Stambler, the designer of what we call the sound design, the cars, anything that's created to enhance the experience. These guys and a team of 20 other sound supervisors and editors creating a very, very impacting soundtrack, mixed beautifully by Mike Casper and Dan Leahy, a team that I've used on Dragonheart, Daylight, The Rat Pack, The Skulls, and now The Fast and Furious. Collaborators of mine, where we are trying to bring sound to a new level of effectiveness and visceralness, and also volume. And it's about the art of loud. How do you create the kind of in your eardrums, in your face, intensity without burning the eardrums out and without making it painful. Worked for years trying to develop methods and theories of how to bring intensity and relieve it, creating like sherbet between courses to clear the ear palate, to allow you to be ready for the next big thing, and how to balance music, dialogue, and effects in different frequency ranges which keep the ear completely alive and involved and enhance the visuals without ever overloading to a place that you can't take. But here is a big moment. The charger gets turned on. I put the sound in all 6 speakers to give you the feeling of this beast. We wanted to do an homage to Bullitt. We have many, many steep hills in the LA city area, and here in Echo Park we are using Michael Tarina Street, which is steep enough to ski, and to try to create the kind of flying sense of San Francisco that was so effectively done in the great car classic Bullitt. To me, has a young Steve McQueen quality. He has that taciturn beauty, the all-Americanness, the competence, the grace, the cat-like grace of McQueen. And I'm sure wherever Steve is, the nation of first unit and second unit, directed by Mick Rogers, tap on the streets of Echo Park, was to create an action sequence that was different from the others, that had a little more stunt stuff in terms of bikes and cars, guns, and the other stunt sequences were either racing, or you've seen the way the hijackings unfolded. They did not use guns. And here Dominic comes in, uses the Charger, which was introduced in the second act as a third act character, and a very fine and painful stunt executed there. Again, no one was hurt doing this. Moving through the locations, now on Glendale Boulevard, Paul Walker throws this Brody and fires himself, which was good that he could do that. One lay down, Mike Runyard, our stunt guy in this scene, did break his leg. That bike lay down a little fast. That's not him lying in the street. It was a second unit shot, and here Rick Yoon playing absolutely dead with his eyes open. I don't know how he does that. I can't do that. I'm not an actor, as you saw when I played the Pizza Boy. Here we go, the calling card, the challenge of the Charger. Okay, come, we're going to figure out once and for all who's the best, you or me, old gunslinger, new gunslinger, the Western, very much alive in the structure and imagery of this film. And they drive over the hill in Glendale Avenue, and they arrive in San Pedro, which, if you know LA, is impossible. But everything is possible in the speed of a cut. And this was a longer scene between the two men, the fine Steadicam work of Jimmy Muro, and we are ready for the race, the final race to the train. To a minimum, I just felt it was important that the two men get on with it, and the less said the better. And here, the wheelie, a thing that really took a lot, because the car kept flooding anytime it went up like that, but I was very dedicated to getting it. It's one of my favorite moments when that Charger kicks up on its hind wheels. We've had a lot of races and chases, and it was time to do something different and to find a way to keep this extremely intense, fast as ever, if not faster, and introduce a lot of jeopardy by the train, as well as the question of who would win, that being secondary to the question of who would die. very much aiming the audience at the idea that this is Dominic's unhinging, that there is a problem in the Charger. We're once again flying through the firewalls and the meters into the engine and seeing that he's thrown a rod, and here comes the speeding train, and yet he would not stop. He floors it. Inventing a new kind of slow motion here that we call smurring, which is a combination of smearing and blurring, and another visual effect, but just to stylize the time so that we can go inside their heads and extend the sequence to really derive the maximum benefit and maximum effect of it. Very close. Very, very close. The twist, for a moment, it's all okay, but it isn't. Bang! And there comes karma calling once again. Stunt choreographed by Mick Rogers of the car, and one of the things we did was on a bike cam to fly with the stunt as opposed to just cover it from 6 or 7 fixed angles. Because of the roll bars, because of the 3-point harness, he could survive something like this. I assure you, it would be hard to survive it in reality. And one of the things we want to make sure we don't do is pretend that this kind of stuff is stuff to be imitated, all under controlled conditions. It's one of the most controversial scenes, probably the most controversial scene inside the development of the script and the execution of the film. It was my belief from the beginning that the cop must let the criminal go, that we had to build everything up to the place where this would be a satisfying ending, that film noirs, maybe he could walk him away in handcuffs, but that's fine for Humphrey Bogart, but it would not work today and not work for these characters. The studio wanted always different endings. We shot many different endings. But to me, this was the ending, and I shot it to be the ending. And you'll see, in terms of camera technique and everything, we had it covered so that Paul Walker could walk to face the music as Dominic goes on the run. Very indeterminate ending for modern films, but puts your imagination to work. What will he tell the police? Will Dominic make it to Mexico? Will Letty be there? Is Vince going to lose his arm? Where is Mia? All questions to be answered in the sequel. Rob Cohen, I've enjoyed talking to you about my passion for this film and some insights or little incidents that happened along the line. Making it, I hope you enjoy seeing it either for the first time or second or whatever time, and that you will drive safely, but in your head, live fast and furious.